Welcome back to We Time Convo.
I'm Debbie.
And I'm Liza. And today we are diving into something that literally everybody with a uterus remembers. The moment Aunt Flo came to town, way too early.
Yep. We're talking about why girls are starting their periods earlier than ever before. Joining us is our favorite OBGYN, Dr. Bovone.
Hello.
And balancing out the biology with a bit of physics and sarcasm, we've got returning guest and high school physics teacher, Marita.
Hello.
Who's here to remind us that gravity is real and so is body odor at age 9. So grab your heating pad, hide the white pants, and let's talk about what's going on in girls' bodies, why it's happening younger, and what it means for parents, teachers, and society as a whole.
Hi, Dr. Bovone. How have you been?
I've been doing great. Yeah, busy at work. It's spring break time, so my husband and kids are back east with my mother-in-law. And since my son's a junior, they're visiting some colleges back there.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Have the weekend free. I'm going to watch Netflix.
Yeah. Oh, that's a little mini vacation for you.
It is.
Yeah, as busy as you are, it's so nice to just have a day or days to just like veg out, right?
That's right. That's right.
Marita, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, we went and saw colleges last weekend. So yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So because I also have a junior and I have a daughter in college too. So, well, if you're not doing it, you can come over for pizza. I'm making pizza tonight.
That's true.
Yeah.
From scratch.
That's why you were late.
That's why I was
making
late.
your pizza dough.
My pizza dough.
So today we're talking about why girls are getting their periods earlier. So I pulled up these stats from statnews.com. I'm going to read off of it, and Dr. Bovone, if you want to chime in, if you want to fact check, or if you know more, feel free to do so. So based on data from more than 71,000 women collected through the Apple Research app, shows that girls in the United States have been getting their first period earlier and earlier over the last 55 years. And it has taken longer for their periods to become regular, pointing to worsening overall reproductive and population health. The research is part of the large Apple Women's Health Study launched in 2019 and conducted with the National Institutes of Health and Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. They found the average age of menarche, which is it like
your first period? Yeah.
When an individual gets their first period, decreased from 12.5 years in 1950 to 1969 to 11.9 years in 2000 to 2005. In the same period, the percentage of people who experience early menarche, which is before age 11, increased from 8.6% to 15.5%. And the percentage of those having very early menarche, which is before age 9, more than doubled from 0.6 to 1.4%.
I was one of those girls. My period started really early. I started at 9.
Wow. I thought I was early. I was
13.
11.
I was 13.
I don't remember.
Yeah, that's okay. But yeah.
I just randomly will be like 11, 12. I don't remember. But I do remember because my mom never really talked to us about like puberty and anything. Yeah. And I remember, I think my mom must have seen in the laundry, like, you know, period stains or whatnot. And she came into my room and she's like, do you know what a period is? And I just said, yes, it's what comes after a complete thought in a sentence. And then she walked out of the room. So that was my education from my mother. And here I am as a gynecologist.
So as a gynecologist, are you seeing this more and more years of being, you know, in this profession that like females are starting their periods earlier?
So I think we know from the data, absolutely, probably even looking back from like the mid 1800s, there was, you know, the puberty was happening earlier and earlier. Then it kind of plateaued in the mid 1900s, but we still do see this trend turn towards earlier puberty. And we don't know all of the reasons why, but we do have like a lot of associations of what we think is contributing to this. I, as a gynecologist, will see teens, but probably the people who deal with this the most would be the pediatricians, because that's where young kids are going. During physical exams, the pediatricians are documenting if there's any breast budding, any pubic or axillary hair. And so they would be the ones to pick up for that, like what we call too early puberty is precocious puberty. And so that is where it's happening. Usually those signs are happening less than 8 years old. So if a young girl is developing breast buds or pubic hair, the pediatricians will notice that and they want to evaluate what is causing it. what is causing the elevated hormone levels, what is happening with their, one of the ways of investigating would be getting an X-ray, looking at bone age. Is their bone age higher than what their chronological age is? What are hormone values? And so these would be like the pediatric endocrinologists, because you can kind of halt puberty if you have this precocious puberty. And why would you want to do that? We know that many factors that go into like having puberty early in terms of like how you're physically looking, but it can impact, future fertility, cardiovascular disease health, diabetes, your final height that you are. And so it is important that the pediatricians are picking up on that. By the time they see me, I'm dealing more with the period problems and going from all of that, but it's probably more the pediatricians. But we are seeing that trend of puberty happening earlier.
So do the pediatricians, when that happens, do they refer an OBGYN typically?
They would probably start the evaluation with probably looking at hormones, looking at an X-ray for like the skeletal age. And then if it's abnormal, that would be more for a pediatric endocrinologist, adolescent gynecology that would manage that.
So why do you think this is happening? Like, could it be diet, stress, environment,
all of
the above?
So probably,
microplastics.
Yes. So probably we look at, there's obesity is one aspect. And so looking at like the obesity rate even from kids 2 to 19, like how many people are obese in the US is about 20%. And that's where their BMI is in like, over 30 and, above the 95th percentile. And then looking at endocrine disruptors, which are these chemicals in our environment, agriculture, that are affecting our hormones because they're acting as hormones. And then also stress. So it's kind of like all of this is linked together.
So would obesity is the cause for the early onset, or would be, how does obesity contribute to that? Does that mean like it increases the production of certain hormones? Is that the idea?
Well, yeah. So obesity will increase your leptin hormone, which is involved in your fat tissue. And so that also will then increase your hormones that you're having, like the pituitary gland, which is making your hormones that gets turned on in puberty, which will then produce the hormones that signal the ovaries in females to make estrogen. And so, but then you step back and go, well, what's causing obesity? And then you're looking at stress factors, you're looking at the neuroendocrine disruptors, what is in our food sources, all of the plastic issues. So everything is linked together. We did see with COVID, I think there was a rise when you're looking at precocious puberty in other countries, China, Brazil, India. A lot of countries saw increased consultations and referrals for precocious puberty during COVID because people were sedentary at home, their stress, their food sources, what they're eating. So it's all linked together.
Once they hit this early puberty menstrual cycle, can it halt and stop, or it once you go, the ship has sailed? Like, as in you'll.
Yeah. So I think when you're looking at like precocious puberty or those that are happening too early, you do want to be on top of it because there are like hormone blockers that you can use, and then you're just delaying puberty until a certain time. And so you do want to be aware of it. But probably for the majority, like the patients that I would see, or when I get asked about their history, they're going through puberty at a normal time, but it might be younger. So usually if you're having like the breast budding less than age 8, that would be another signal to like see your pediatrician. But if a young girl is like 9, 10, and she's having breast buds and having her period, then, at 10, that's all within the norm. So usually with the puberty development, typically you'll have, also that gets stimulated by the adrenal glands is our androgens, testosterone. So you start having like hair, pubic hair, axillary hair, and that kind of fine vellus. It's not really coarse. And then you have in girls like the breast budding. And then a few years after that, like you have the increase in height, and then the period, the first period. And then you continue to have the change in hair. So like the pubic hair becomes more coarse. And so all of that has a typical pattern. Not everyone falls into like, sometimes people get, more of their pubic hair before the breast budding, but Yeah. That's why pediatricians at their yearly exams or sooner, if it becomes a concern for a parent, are looking at those things.
Got it. Well, for me, I had this, and I guess knowing that once you get your period, that means you can actually have a baby.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So like that to me was scary.
Well, I think it's telling people, young girls, like you're becoming a woman. And part of it is explaining that education part to young girls of like, now your body, this is what a period is. This is why you have it. So I'll always explain to young girls, just to make sure they have the educational background, that when you have your period, basically your hormones are made up in your brain, which signals your ovaries, which then signals like an egg to get developed, and the uterine lining, like everything is towards having a baby in a sense. And then when you're not pregnant, the switch is flipped and you have your period. And so then that will lead into like conversations about contraception. And I think there is a, too young of an age per se, but I think once you're getting into puberty, you have to have those talks because you just start normalizing talking about it. That it's not a big deal to talk about periods and cramps and your flow and needing protection. And then eventually contraception, that it becomes a normal thing and part of our just daily lives.
Have you noticed that people are more sexually active younger and younger as, move continue on? Or is it like some of the stories that I hear, I'm like, I can't believe that's so young. But I guess sometimes in our society, it's kind of normal that they're at that age having.
Well, and then we have social media now and TV, and kids see this stuff, right?
I mean,
feel like that
there's
plays a big part.
so many factors. Yeah. But yet, as we see the age of puberty and their bodily changes happening earlier, then there's this mismatch sometimes of like what their bodies look like to what like their minds are still young.
Yes.
But yet their bodies are, kind of like those girls that develop sooner, all of a sudden like other adults and people see them with maybe a more adult type of female body.
Yeah.
And then social media, TV, they feel this expectation that they should be engaging, or sexual assault and people taking advantage of them. So I think it's never too early to have that discussion of teenagers and sexuality. The teen birth rate is down, which is good. So hopefully we're doing a good job with contraception. And sex is, we want to normalize sex. Like sex should be fun and it's natural to have sex. But I think what comes with that is the emotional aspects of being able to deal and to make, having consent with sex and understanding what sex is, and that it should be pleasurable and it should be fun, but you want it to be safe. And you want to keep your body safe too.
So what are some of the short-term and long-term health implications of early menstruation?
So with having early periods, it does increase your risk later on in life of increased breast cancer, uterine, ovarian cancer, diabetes, heart disease, bone health, and also like eating disorders. Because again, sometimes these girls are developing and they're comparing themselves to other friends, and they might think, oh, if I don't eat, then, I can be thinner. Maybe I won't, my breasts might get smaller. Or it takes really, I think sometimes it's one comment from anyone, whether it's in a friend or another adult, that we have to be really careful with our words to everyone, even to adults, because, our words have power. And sometimes it's just one offhanded comment that you might think is a joke, but people go home and internalize that.
Unless you have Asian parents.
Yes, I know.
But it's the kids at this age that this is where they're developing their sense of self. And I think, a couple of us are Gen Xers, and our stereotype is that we're a very sarcastic generation, right? But so kids today, they're like, we say that they're very sensitive, but we keep forgetting that but they're still so young. And that whole part about we see like, oh my gosh, that girl, she's only 11 and she looks like that. We have to remember that they are only 11 and they're still developing their own sense of self. So that I have things that in my back of my mind that grown up said about comparing me and my sister that still haunt me today. And so I keep trying to okay, well, that's, you got to remember that their mental health is just as important as their physical health. And so I would hope that people think before they speak and make these judgments about especially young women, right? When they see them out in the wild, right? Before you comment, because yes, there are some girls that look more mature for their age. And there are a lot of, my daughter is one of them that she still looks like a baby. And I'm like, just enjoy it because you'll be 50 and people can't believe that you're over 50. And so, but we got to keep that in mind. And sometimes I just wish people would think before they speak. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the mental health and emotional development, right? I mean, yeah, we forget. And we don't really, me, I'm probably not sensitive to it as well. Like you said, growing up in an Asian family, it's just kind of like one of those things. But you're absolutely right. They're like still babies.
And you know what, people, especially men, if you think that they look pregnant, don't ask if they're pregnant.
For me,
just don't.
And similarly, I think for young boys, they will get like the gynecomastia, like as they're developing, they have more fat, like breasts, they might look like they have breasts. Now that can be an issue later on, and maybe something's going on. But like for like preteen puberty with boys, that they might have that for a few years. And so not to comment on it in a negative way.
Yeah. Like I know one of my girlfriends, she was worried because her son's, all through elementary and junior high, he was like the shortest one out of their group. And she was like, oh my God, is he going to get taller? But now he's one of the taller ones. So there's a lot of pressure with just comparing.
Yes. Yeah.
Females naturally start puberty before boys. Anyways,
Yes.
Because I remember in elementary school, and I'm 5 feet, but I was the tall one. I was overtowering boys, right? And it was embarrassing because they don't want, they want to be taller. And so now, like, I obviously didn't grow after that, but the boys I knew in elementary school, they're way taller than me. So,
Yep. So in regards to just being a parent, what should we watch for in terms of early puberty?
So I think probably looking at if you're noticing, the secondary sexual characteristics, whether it's breast development or, axillary hair or pubic hair. And again, as a parent, you're also at that age where they're creating their boundaries and, closing the bathroom door. And so they're not little toddlers anymore that you're seeing this, but you might notice body odor. And so if they are younger and they have body odor, to probably either, talking about it with your child or bringing it up with the pediatrician to say, should we be concerned? And then, probably like being the tallest one, sometimes that like height, growth spurt happening sooner than others might also be an indicator. So I think it's just observing your child. And then you also want to look at, because there's the physical signs, but also the mental health, because we know that early puberty does increase anxiety, depression, substance abuse, earlier ages of sexual activity. Again, because like our bodies are looking a certain way and our hormones are making us feel a certain way. Everything's normal, but then you fold in like social media, TV, what they're reading and seeing, and then they just assume I'm feeling these things, I should go act on them. But remember, their frontal lobe isn't really developed until like 25, 26, but they're taking these like risk-taking behaviors that they may not really understand, or we have people taking advantage of our children. So I think you just have to always be looking at your kid and hopefully building that trust and relationship with them. But it's hard because kids are also getting their independence at the same time and wanting that privacy.
So do you feel like this trend is likely to continue?
I think it may likely continue in the sense that like, especially these, the obesity rates, the neuroendocrine disruptors, of things that are in chemicals that are in our air and water and what we're eating and drinking, and it's everywhere. Like until we solve those issues, then I think we're just on this trend more and more. But how do we solve all those issues? I think now parents can try to minimize like plastic use, eating, organic, we talk about, organic products, and then looking at like stress, the stress that we have of, what we put on our children, probably not purposely, perhaps, that you may not think it's stressful, but it is. What stress the kids are getting from each other, from social media. And then sleep is very important, not, and all of the activities with like being online or playing video games of like, how that's disrupting our sleep, like the blue light and everything.
How about being active and, just
being active is very important. Yeah.
Okay.
I think one of the things is to encourage your child to have something like physical activity, or even, a club or theater or something, so that you're not like sedentary, alone, that you're in a community. And even, sports like golf and tennis might be more like singular, or like in a small group, but you're like with other people when you're playing them. Going
back to like the root causes for this stuff, and like what we do is like it ties back to other times that we've had conversations about microplastics. I feel like, to me, what's frustrating is that this whole environmental issue, it like people just think of it as just the climate or just pollution. I'm like, but all of these problems are now permeating through into our physical and our mental health. Yeah. And so it would be nice to see people in those positions of power passing laws and, making some good decisions about, okay, we have to think of everything as this, symbiotic relationship, not just what the external environment looks like, it affects the internal environment of every individual.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially that, that microplastics episode that we did. It's just very eye-opening to me, right? Yeah. Like I watch, look at everything now that I put on my body, consume what's in the air.
So looking, because it really even starts during fetal development. So what that woman is exposed to during pregnancy is affecting her fetus. And so we have to be aware of that. Like, we don't want to scare women when they're pregnant, but some of it is just unavoidable because it's just everywhere in our environment. Like, you can do the best you can, but you can't just be like holed up at home, like growing your own food and not being out in the open. But yeah, it is everywhere. And looking at what we're putting on our bodies, like the teens, it's this whole industry has exploded with like the makeup and the cosmetics and they're marketing to the girls. And the girls shouldn't be putting these things on their faces. They don't need a whole skin regimen, but yet it's all marketed towards that, and you see the marketing of like sanitary products, which is good to have like teen size, because their bodies are different. They're going through puberty earlier. And so a young girl who's smaller can't be using a sanitary pad that's made for like a grown woman. But all of it's linked together, and all of like probably the microplastics that's available in the sanitary products. Yeah.
I'm just overwhelmed. Because you're absolutely right. There's, as I think about it, right, that obviously that all makes sense, but then it's like, you can only control you. Yeah. But if you think about like really where actual change needs to happen, it's obviously outside of you, right? And that's the part that overwhelms me because I feel like the people who can actually initiate that type of change, that is not their goal.
Yeah. So because I'm a teacher, so what I would tell my students is that's when you are supposed to write your congressman, write your senator, write your local government officials and say, this is important to me. If you want me to vote for you again, then you need to show me that this is also important to you. We've seen a lot of protests over the last couple of weeks, right? So peaceful protest is another way to make our voices heard. And so that's it. We don't want to say that. Yes, other people have to make choices, but we have to, we as the general public, if we care about that, we have to speak up and say, hey, this is important to us. Please listen to us. We're the ones that are giving you the power. Use it as we intended you to use it.
So Dr. Bovone, as this trend is happening and continues, and I know that we do, teach kids at school about sexual health and periods and stuff. And this is happening before the age of 9 in some cases. Do you feel like advice to parents, should we be talking to our kids about early puberty even before age 9?
Definitely, probably. Yeah, because I think as their bodies changes, if they're not aware of what's happening to them, it would be scary. Or if a young girl suddenly had their period and they had no idea what it was, she's probably going to think she's dying. She might be embarrassed and not go and ask someone. And so it's good for them to know that. But yes, schools usually will do it in like 5th or 6th grade. So it should be a ongoing discussion, age appropriate. So maybe it's something that's just, we talk about our bodies even just from that, like those early school years, and then you build upon it every year would be the important thing.
just wild because I feel like now like this trend, it's like, okay, it should be in kindergarten. Yeah. It should be, because Violet's 6, and it's like, I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, she could have her period, so it started happening earlier and earlier.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to me is because, and I don't know, maybe it's that generation that we're in. It's interesting because I feel like some people want to outsource it. Like, okay, the doctor will talk about it. The school will talk about it. Like they'll hear it from someone else, but hopefully like all these other things and I don't want to talk about it.
Yes.
And so I just feel like there's a lot of people in that bucket where they're outsourcing because they feel like it's uncomfortable. It's a difficult situation, but we got to get comfortable with that uncomfortable, I feel.
Yes, 100%. I think one of the key things would be like, what can we do? I think we have to model that behavior. We have to with the healthy eating and normalizing our bodies and talking about things. And why do we purchase these products and not these products? And I think the earlier we start doing it, then when kids are out in the world, hopefully they'll make those good decisions as well, or at least understand why those decisions were made for them. But I think a lot of people, parents might, they always say they'll serve their kids all healthy food. I'll deal with this in women coming in and we talk about nutrition. And I'll say, it's just like with your child, you give them the healthy foods. Why aren't you feeding yourself this? Why aren't you taking care of yourself the same way? Or everything you eat in pregnancy, the baby's seeing those effects. So we want to be making healthy choices.
It's very interesting for sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Bovone.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Marita.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you.